It has been 20 hours since the warp drive malfunctioned, and in that time, I've been thrown across 57 dimensions, scrambling for resources to secure my place and fix the vessel. I have a claustrophobic, messy factory built below the platform, and a strong, secure fortress on the surface. To fix the warp drive and return home, I must continue to research and to develop my factory. All the while, I cannot let my guard down, for my factory lives on the knife's edge, under siege constantly, while resources are limited. The first thing I want is to set up a way to automatically send any resources we want from the factory floor to the surface. To do this, we will use logistics bots as well as some circuit tricks in a dedicated staircase loader. I'll spare the technical details, but how this essentially works is by comparing how many resources we have in the logistics system to the values we have set in this combinator, and then, if the system has less of an item than the value in the combinator, the item is set as a request in the chest downstairs, which is then delivered to that chest, which is then delivered to the surface. This allows us to do things like automatically request repair packs, replacement bots, replacement buildings, and other such things so the surface defence can work without almost any assistance from us. It's worth noting what I realised here, which is that loaders have to go from a building to a belt, or a belt to a building. They cannot go from a building to a building, so having the requester chest right in front of the loader didn't work. I ended up having to place a belt and an inserter between them. We land on a new type of planet we've never seen before, covered in trees and called a jungle planet. Whilst you watch me struggle through the foliage here, I want to talk about our plans for this episode. Overall, the biggest limitation in this playthrough is going to be resource input, so to compensate for this, we're going to want the productivity of the shit out of every assembler we can. Furthermore, providing ammo to harvest the platforms by hand is an inefficient use of our time, and is not sustainable long term, so laser turrets are on the cards. A common issue, or perhaps prerequisite of both of these things, is power. Spoilers, we are not running hundreds of megawatts of machinery on coal, so before we can kick any of these plans into motion, we need to get nuclear energy set up. To provide fuel for the reactor, we need lots of uranium-235, meaning we need Corvarex, because getting that amount of 235 is not feasible by mining alone in this mod. With this information, we can build a checklist of what we need to do this episode. Step 1, acquire 1500 purple science. Step 2, research the Corvarex enrichment process. Step 3, get 40 uranium-235 to kickstart the enrichment process. Step 4, build a nuclear reactor. Step 5, set up laser turrets and productivity modules. Step 6, profit? It might not all be in that exact order, as to get the 1500 purple science is a matter of waiting, but we might get the required amount of uranium whilst it accumulates. Anyway, I decide that this jungle planet is lame and really annoying to navigate, so it's time to move on. Now on a new planet, I find the tiniest little dinky uranium patch on my way out, so I put down my harvester platform to start chipping away at the insane amount of uranium we need to get the required 40 U-235. According to the wiki, it takes on average 57,140 uranium ore to get the required amount, but I of course need to get more than that in case I get quite unlucky. To facilitate the collection of this 57,140, plus or minus about 10,000 uranium ore, I need a bigger buffer. A single steel chest can hold 2,400 uranium ore, so I'll want at least 20 of those, but it can't hurt to have some more. It's at this point we change our character's colour to green, as symbolism for our devotion to one true power source. I also build some more centrifuges to help work through the accumulated ore. I have an idea of how to give us a better estimate of how much uranium we need. There is a 0.7% chance that uranium processing cycle will give us U-235, meaning that if we multiply the number of uranium ore by 0.1 to give us the number of processing cycles, and then by 0.007 to estimate how many of those will provide us with U-235 for a total multiplication of 0.0007, it will, in effect, give us an estimate of how much U-235 our buffered ore will provide us. Naturally, I donkey it up the first time, giving us an estimate of over 100 when it should actually be 10. I get that fixed, and seeing that we have 18 uranium-235, we need to get the little number up to 22, or something more like 25 to be safe, and we should be able to last indefinitely on this amount of uranium alone if we use Corvarex. Anyway, we jump to a new planet and end up finding this massive uranium patch, so hopefully this will be the last one we ever need to tap. Our surface defences as they are incredibly robust, and we can quite easily make them more so using some lasers and wall mazes, so usually the limiting factor on how long we can stay on the planet is actually how well our harvester platforms are holding up. not necessarily the base itself. Even when the harvesters are far outside our warp platform's pollution cloud, miners are one of the most polluting buildings in the game, so they can pull in a lot of biters. To solve this, and extend how long we can stay on the planet, I quickly get some efficiency modules semi-automated. I put them straight into my miners on the left harvester platform, as it is the larger one currently. Using 3 efficiency modules in each miner leads to a maximum 80% decrease in pollution, which translates to an 80% decrease in biter attacks, extending the lifetime of the harvester platform so we can stay on a given planet for longer. It also, of course, decreases the power consumption of the miners by 80%, which is welcomed considering how much we are struggling with power. The factory floor is the most convenient place to build, also making its space the most sought for in the whole vessel. To free up some more space there, I'm planning to move my smelting down to the harvester platform, so iron and copper are taken from the mines, straight into furnaces. This ore buffer is in the way, but rather than move it all myself, I disconnect its inputs and build around it while it drains. I'm using the same design I used upstairs, but I want to make the most out of all the space down here, so I build a sort of chicane in the middle to fit all 48 furnaces needed to satisfy a red belt around the outside instead of taking up the middle of the room. I begin the slow process of untying this Gordian knot in the centre here. It served its purpose well, but it can be a headache deciphering sometimes. Previously, iron and copper could go through either chest on the right there, but in the future I plan for each platform to specify in either iron or copper, so the only items which need to be sorted are the lesser resources. To save too much redesigning now, I route the iron over to where the old iron smelter is, where I will remove the old smelter, buffer the plates coming in, and plug it in like the smelter was. All of this is not really saving as much space right now, but it's an investment which we will benefit from later. Whilst we've been doing all of this, a lot of purple science has been accumulating. One more big step towards Corvarex. Our biggest bottleneck for purple science is steel, so in the interest of saving some hours of my life, I decided to set up some supplemental steel from excess iron ore. I'm not going to route it up to the factory floor, I'll just pick it up out of the chest and dump it into whatever process is lacking steel, or just the logistics system if I have a lot kicking around. A good thing to always remember in this mod is that you're not limited to only using the harvester platforms to harvest resources. I often find that due to the absurd mining productivity upgrades this mod provides, even a few miners produce massive amounts of resources, so little outposts like these can be very effective. Exploring is a lot easier now with bots, as these massive alien biomes forests stand no chance against my deconstruction planner. In the end, despite my previous tips about placing the harvester platforms as far away as possible, I end up just plonking one right on the starter patch, because I can't find any iron elsewhere, and I need to keep producing purple science. I accidentally placed the wrong harvester platform for a moment however, leading to iron ore coming up to my factory floor despite nowhere to smelt it. I just shot it in a buffer chest for now, it's not even worth the effort of moving to the smelters. Whilst we might not want to power on a nuclear reactor until we have Corvarex nearly set up, we can certainly build it. I'm going with a 2x2 reactor, giving us a potential of 480 megawatts of power, which should be more than enough to see us through to the rocket. This requires 48 heat exchangers and a whopping 84 turbines, but we can just place the turbines down as we need more power, doesn't need to be all at once. To save as much uranium as possible, we will be smartly controlling reactor burns using a massive steam storage array, and only inserting fuel when the steam is low. This has the effect of turning the power plant from a constant producer like a solar panel to a demand producer like a steam engine, meaning that if we only use 240 megawatts, we will only use half as much fuel as we would at 480 megawatts. I made a YouTube short about this a while ago, and people told me this was useless in the vanilla game because uranium is plentiful. But in a mod like this where uranium's limited, it absolutely shines. If you want a tutorial of how to do this, go and watch that short, as I wouldn't want to get bogged down in the detail here. In preparation for Corvarex finishing, I set it up in the corner here so that I can just copy the recipe in once the research is finished and get it going. I also get the fuel inserters ready. I have enough uranium stocked up that I can happily start the reactor now and have enough fuel to last us until Corvarex finishes, so I'm preparing to do that. We throw some fuel in, starting the process now. We don't actually have any steam turbines placed yet, so the steam will be just going into storage because I want enough stored up to make the transfer from coal to nuclear as seamless as possible. I start by replacing just a few steam engines with turbines. I don't want to rush too fast and find a flaw in the design, but look at that, works like a charm. We can now safely remove the coal plant, and with that our base is entirely reliant on nuclear power. It's also around this time that Corvarex finishes researching, so we can add the recipe in for centrifuge, and wave bye bye to any thoughts of power issues for the foreseeable future. With our nuclear power plant now operational, we have a lot of spare power kicking around we can utilise. Our biggest resource drain currently is iron plates being spent as ammo on the surface, so why don't we take some of the strain off of iron production and move it onto power production? I'm a firm believer that the best defence incorporates a little bit of every technique, so we will only replace the front layer of gun turrets with lasers. Lasers do more damage as biters have no resistance to them, but to balance this they shoot quite a bit slower. The most important thing though is that they have 2.5 times as much health as gun turrets, so they can take more of a beating from spitters, making them ideal for the very front lines. With this, we have completely replaced our outer layer with lasers. Next up is the harvester platforms. We can replace all of our defences on these with laser turrets, as they can happily take on mid-sized groups, as long as there is enough of them. I decide in the end to just completely redesign the platform if I'm out taking it apart, most importantly, preparing it for later when I have the potential for 3 lanes worth of output. I also decide to outfit it with a radar, so we can see what's going on around it. We only have one more upgrade until we reach the maximum platform size, so we are closing in on the final design. The other one is not yet upgraded, but we can still give it laser turrets, leaving us with one less thing to restock. You might remember earlier, when I was discussing our time spent on a given planet, I said that the biggest limiting factor was how well the harvester platforms could survive, not the main platform itself. Well, the boot is back on the other foot now, as our harvester platforms deal quite well, but the main platform struggles past around 60% pollution. I proposed 2 upgrades, one being laser turrets, and the other one being wall mazes. Since the laser turrets are already done, I'll get around to the wall mazes. I researched an upgrade for the platform size, but we will leave the inner walls where they are. Then, on the spare platform outside, I can place these long wall segments with holes in them, which serve a dual purpose. On one hand, they extend the distance a biter has to go to reach a wall, since it has to path following the chicanes, and on the other hand, it forces many biters through the same spot, increasing the effectiveness on the flamethrowers massively. Whilst waiting for walls to produce, my oil outpost starts getting torn apart and I don't know why. It has a lot of laser turrets, it's barely in my pollution cloud, so what could the problem be? Well, it's that bloody planetary teleporter. As it turns out, it can only pull through 2 megawatts from the main platform, which is of course not nearly enough for 17 laser turrets and 9 pump jacks to share. The turrets stand by, impotent, helplessly watching the biters slowly chew through their brethren. Thankfully, the fix is obvious and easy. There is a technology to increase the teleporter's potential discharge rate, so I can just research a few tiers of that. I find a flaw with my walls. The outermost layer is so far away that spitters can happily chew away at it without being interrupted by my turrets. Because of this, I end up knocking off the outside layer and settle for just 2 rows of maze. It'll still certainly be enough. Anyway, with that finished, we should hopefully be able to stay on planets for a bit longer, and we can move on to our next project. Initially, I planned to use steel furnaces for my next upgrade to my smelting capacity, but then I realised, why would I want to do that when I have 480 megawatts worth of power under my feet? Electric furnaces are a no-brainer at this point, but there is one issue. You see, electric furnaces are big, being by area, over twice as large as steel furnaces. So if we wanted to have as much production using electric furnaces as we could with steel furnaces, it has the potential to take up much more space. But with some tier 1 speed modules, we can just about fit in 2 red belts worth into our currently sized harvester floor. Even better, it's completely brain dead to plug in. No belt mixing required, just run the line of ore straight into the furnaces. I've out the plates in where the copper ore was going earlier, and I can plug it straight onto the copper line with a priority splitter, to only add it on once the entire copper ore buffer is emptied. With the groundwork mostly set, it's time to iterate our factory into its next form. Due to the massive buffs Warptorio gives to logistic bots, I think a bot base is in order. We free up some space on the right here for the beating heart of every base, its green circuit production. Ironically, despite this being planned to be a primarily bot base, at its heart, the green circuit production will be belted, simply because it's needed in such magnitude. It's not actually a massive amount of production yet, however if we find later that we need more we can add some bot based green circuits as well, but this one leaves space for some potential speed beacons, so hopefully that won't be necessary. Belts take up an absolutely massive amount of space currently, so I'm hoping by their removal we can fit much bot production in this into an area roughly the same size. Though it will be tempting to fill the whole thing up, we're going to want to leave some space for space science production. Once our platform triloaders have finished researching, we are going to upgrade the 2 lanes of iron and copper, which might not seem like a lot, but that beacon in the middle covers the whole floor, and it's full of productivity modules. A single assembler with increased productivity has only a minimal effect on resource usage, but every single assembler having productivity applied can make a massive difference, especially in long production chains. Next up, we upgrade the iron smelting to electric furnaces, bringing us one step closer to our fully functional base. I tear down the bottom left of the factory floor, leaving us room to work on the next part of the base. If green circuits were the heart, this is the aorta. That's right, it's red circuits. We start with a tiny compact plastic build right in the corner, and then move on to the main event. I'll be honest, by likelihood it probably won't even be enough, but the beauty of bot bases is that you can shut down more production when and wherever you want. Landing on a new planet, I'm feeling brave, so I try to take on this big base covering an iron patch using only turret creep. Surprisingly, it goes very well, only losing a few turrets in the process. It's worth noting that every new planet I'm going to, I'm starting off using the warp stabilizer, which stops my warp platform producing pollution while it's active, to eke out as much extra time on every planet as possible. It's only limited by my power production, so I also have the capability to run it for quite a long time thanks to the nuclear power plant. I then try to turret creep using lasers, which is a bit less successful. I wipe out half a nest with them, but lose a few, and overall it just really wasn't worth it. Back in the factory, I set up red and green science. As stated previously, everything is getting productivity modules, as we want as much production as possible from our limited resource input. I also built a bigger and better steel build over here. I was under the impression steel could not benefit from productivity for some reason, so I built it in another one of the outer corridors, where the central beacon doesn't reach to save space in the middle for items that I thought could be productivity. With this, we can erase the old steel build, leaving us more area to build up our bot base. We next build blue circuits. Again, I'm not building to any specific ratio, as half of the fun of the game is running around fixing bottlenecks later. I just want enough production to get working through science. The hardest part about bot bases is the fluids, so I'm dedicating this corner to the recipes that need fluids, and thankfully only 3 recipes needed for science actually require them. As always, we need a lot of engines, so this entire top right corner is full of them. I also get our blue science down, ticking off another major step in getting this base operational. In my infinite wisdom, I decide to sit inside the wall maze whilst looking at the map, leading to my demise. I'd love to provide any explanation, but I think the simple answer is that I am just incredibly stupid. I have a quite bright idea for low density structure production, if I do say so myself, where I pull the copper straight off one of the belts that feed the green circuits, instead of bringing it in by bots. It requires some shuffling things around, but it certainly works. Obviously, and I'm sure you are absolutely sick of hearing this by now, this isn't going to be enough. But I was closing in on 11 hours of footage here, and I was just sort of rushing towards getting to a reasonable end point. All of this production is actually managing to strain my nuclear reactor, so I head down and stick some more turbines on. This puts our limit up to 372 megawatts, which should last us much longer. Then again, I guess we'll see once we start putting tier 3 modules into that central beacon. We have one ingredient left before yellow science is ready, that being flying robot frames. I overbuild them, as I want to use some to bolster my logistics network and also to produce replacement construction bots to send up to the surface, as we're willing to lose them at an increasing rate. Anyway, we finally get those yellow science assemblers down, allowing us to access some very powerful researches for us to explore next time. My final act is to demolish the old blue science setup and labs to free up space for our new research area. Labs are probably second only to the rocket silo in how much they benefit from productivity modules, so I'd like them within range of the warp beacon, so they get more productivity, meaning more research per science pack. I set them to deconstruct, and then go up to the surface to observe our defences, whilst the bots do the hard work. As we can see by this yellow zone, the beacon covers roughly up to the end of the outward corridors, so we don't want any labs outside of that. We have the belts down for the 6 science packs, but we can easily add another one to include all 7. Anyway, I decided that was a good point to end off, and next time we can unlock a lot more of the tech tree, and start moving towards our victory condition, settling a planet. But for now, thank you all for watching, and have a good day. Huge thank you to our patrons: Dick Dastardly Enthusiast, Larry, Marco Zafran, Handlebars, Matthias Faison, Fen Brew, Leo, LLLJJJ, and Ryan Esdale.